Hey guys, welcome to Quinian's Budget Crafts. So, for the arena that I promised, what we've got here is 4 panels of MDF covered in some the drywall insulation kit foam. It's like the 3/4 inch foam. I went ahead and coated it in Mod Podge and then spray painted it this like brownish red just to make sure my camera doesn't freak out because it doesn't like it when I have a massive slab of white. And I've got a bunch of these little parts printed out. The first thing to do is figure out exactly where I want to put them. Mostly because that determines where the road is going to go. I had originally wanted to build this to mimic the Talladega Superspeedway, but even scaled down really small, that thing's like 500 by 500 feet, so that's not happening. But I do still want, the kind of the racetrack feel. For the roads, I'm going to do those just like I did before, except they're not going to be backed with anything. There's just the cork going to be stuck down to the thing here. But I'll go ahead and use my existing roads to measure out half of one of these cork sheets and then cut a bunch of them in half. These are self-adhesive cork sheets I got from the dollar store. I'm not sure if you can get them off like Amazon or whatever, but probably. For my sign here that has the round and phase for the game on it, I wanted to use dry erase because that's a lot easier than having a whole bunch of magnetic numbers you got to switch out. So no problem, just grab a dry erase board from the dollar store, go ahead and pop those magnets off the back and save them. You can use them for something. And then go ahead and cut out a couple of little squares. This dry erase board is backed with cardboard, and you can use that if you want to. I don't want that on there, so I'll just go ahead and trim that off with a snap-off offal knife blade, whatever. Just be careful you don't cut yourself. When I was making this sign in Blender, I totally forgot that when you actually manually type in the dimensions you want for your added object, it doubles that for some reason. I don't remember why. But I put a magnet hole on the back of this thing and it's twice the size it needs to be. That's not a problem, we'll sort it out later. But speaking of magnets, I have these bases from Cobalt Keep here, and they're really cool magnetic bases. They come with the magnets already there for you to put them in. These bases are going to be used for the gun towers, but first let's go ahead and glue all these magnets in. Pretty simple, you just put a drop of glue into each of the little magnet slots and then start sliding magnets in. If you're worried about the magnet's polarity, just make sure you keep your magnet stacked the same direction and put one in and slide it off, put the next one in and slide it off like a Pez dispenser or something like that. For the magnet on the sign, I'm going to use one of those 2x4 little tiny magnets I have and just put it in the center, put a whole bunch of baking soda and super glue around it. That'll hold it in just fine. I could have used a larger magnet if I had had one, but I didn't, so that's alright. While I have these little magnets out though, I've got a bunch of these sci-fi bases. You can find those on Thingiverse, and I put a little magnet slot in the bottom of those. Same idea, that they ended up too big, but that's fine. And then what I do to ensure that the polarity is correct is I put the little miniature base from Cobalt Keep on the front side of the little bases here, and then drop a magnet in, and it'll automatically flip over to whatever polarity is going to make them stick together. And then same thing, you just go ahead and super glue them in, a little bit of baking soda. In order to paint up all the parts that are going to go on the thing, I just hit them with some basic spray paint like red, yellow, silver, whatever. I think I used tan on the wood portions here. To make the wood grain show up on the wood portions here, I'm using that same ink wash that I got in one of those sets. The same stuff I used in the High Noon thing. That works really well on wood. And then on any pieces where the wood had been spray painted, like on this red one that had been spray painted red, I just went through and put some tan over the top of it to give it a base, and then more stain to make it show up. Then I went back through with some gray and picked out all the bits of concrete and stuff. This cool little paintbrush holder / water tank / wet palette thing, that's on Thingiverse too. This thing's really cool actually. You're going to need an FDM printer to print that one out. It's not going to fit most resin printers. But yeah, that's pretty cool if you want to print that one out for yourself. Once I had gotten all the concrete, I went through with some black. I think this was gloss black to try and make all the tires look like shiny rubber tires. All these little barricades and stuff, all the stuff is on Thingiverse, but they just have a lot of detail on them. I think most of them are remixes of a whole bunch of other assorted parts. But whoever did the remixing did a very good job. And then on the background of that sign, I went ahead and did a mixture of black and then that brown ink wash just to make it gross. And made all of the barrels red because, you know, every explosive barrel is red, right? And I also, when I had the red out, went ahead and painted up the letters on the sign so they stand out a bit more. To glue that dry erase onto the sign, all you got to do is paint down some glue and stick it on. It's really simple. It's pretty much just paper on the back of that. And there we go. We can write on it with some dry erase and wipe it right away. And you don't have to deal with a whole bunch of miscellaneous small parts. On the backing of the sign there, which is actually a billboard, if you go looking for it on Thingiverse, I forgot to put a magnet hole in there, so I had to drill it out and then glue in a magnet for it. No big deal, really. Just, you know, be safe with resin dust. And then I realized there were a few pieces here and there of silver that had gotten spray painted whatever other color, like the door locks and stuff on the sunken cargo containers. And the more I looked at these, the more I figured that the little bags or lumps or whatever that is around the side of the containers could probably be sandbags, like, you know, the green army sandbags. Plus it adds a little interest to it, so I went ahead and did those up in green. So these gun towers here are actually just a remix of the water tower that's actually also on this board, and one of the big guns that somebody has in a Gaslands gun pack. I'm just gluing those down to these Cobalt Keep bases. And then for the road, I just went ahead and put out a couple of full-size sheets there, and then used my road piece with a couple of pins taped to it so that I could trace out the width of the road around in a curve. And then I just, kind of fudged the line a little bit and cut it out with some scissors. It worked out fine. Because cork will soak up a whole lot of paint, and racetracks like the Talladega Speedway, they're not asphalt, they're concrete, so it's like a light gray. It's not like the dark road color. I just went ahead and sprayed those with some gray spray paint. Just get it done nice and fast. And then because these are self-adhesive, all you got to do is peel the sticky off the back and stick them down. Anywhere you've gone over the seam of two different panels, you just run your knife right down through the seam there and split them in half. And this right here is actually the main reason for that sign that tells you what round and phase you're in, is I wanted something to connect all of the panels together, and this is actually one of the water towers too. It's the wooden one. I just split it into 4 is all. And because that is split in 4, I can put it dead center of the board, and because the way the top piece goes onto it with the little pegs, that'll help hold the board together when you're using it. And because it's dead center of the board in a giant eyesore otherwise, I made it that sign to tell you what round and phase you're in, so it kind of blends in. Then I went through and did some minor adjusting to the roads here. I wanted to make sure I had enough road leading up to the ramp there, and then I wanted a space in between them where there's a big puddle. I had thought about leaving the road and just digging it out to like have some road left there, but because there are ramps, I figured I would just take the road out completely. As far as the spacing of these ramps go, I'm a little bit twisted and decided to make them just about a long straight, so you're probably not going to make that jump, but it'd be funny. Anywhere your roads didn't quite match up, they have like weird overhang or something's just not right, just go through and shave off what you didn't need there. Any large bits that you took off because you wanted to, change up how your stuff is, just to come back down to the stuff you peeled off the back, you can save that for later. Might need a little super glue to stick down securely after that, but you can still reuse that. Once I had gotten all the roads done, I figured out where I wanted all of the barricades and gun towers and barrels and all that fun stuff, and started laying out some of these pipes back here. I don't know why I decided to use the pipes, I just thought they'd be kind of cool. And for the area where the pipes end over here by this shack, I decided it would be kind of cool to have them, collapsed. But once you've got everything laid out, you know exactly where everything is going, you just go ahead and start gluing everything down. These little bottles of super glue I got from the dollar store, it's kind of weird. It doesn't hold right away, it's very watery, but if you don't need it to grip right away, like you're just going to put it and then set something on it, like I'm doing with these barricades, it works really, really well. Once it actually does dry, it's a super strong hold. This one gun tower hanging out in the middle by itself, I figured it would look kind of cool if it were like on a raised platform. So I went ahead and stuck a couple of rings. Those are actually from the pipe setup. but they work pretty good here. Just glued those together and then glued that little magnetic base on top of it. Then you go through with the marker or whatever you want, make a few spots for wherever there are going to be puddles, if you're doing puddles. I wanted to do puddles just because I like playing with epoxy. And I really did want a giant puddle in between the two ramps there. Anything sharp and spiky will work to dig the foam out, and it works pretty good on that the cork that you're using for the road too. Before I can do the epoxy though, I'm going to go ahead and mix up some paint, Mod Podge, and some Dry Deck spackling, which is just drywall spackle. You don't have to use Dry Decks, use whatever brand you like. I just use that because it dries pretty quickly. Just mix all that up and just start plastering it all over the whole thing. My biggest concern is covering the cracks between the things so my foam sheets weren't big enough to fit one of these panels. But I did want to get the paint color all over the whole thing too. For where the pipe is broken, I tried doing just an epoxy pour that didn't work, so I went back with some hot glue and made a little fountain with that. And then my epoxy has something to actually cling onto. So this epoxy has been mixed with just one drop of the color shift, like bright green sort of paint. And that makes it look a little bit toxic, like some kind of weird green grossness. For the puddles, I just went ahead and squirted a whole bunch of this dollar store epoxy into one of the little cups and put a drop of green and a drop of brown in there. And then went through putting it in all the little puddles. For the big puddle in between the two panels, I put some tape on either side to keep the stuff from leaking and to keep the epoxy from sticking. I'm not trying to glue the boards together. And while that dries, I can go through and separate wherever that drywall compound did actually glue everything together. And then if I went a little crazy with the knife and got off the side or something, just go through and repaint that with a little bit of brown paint. The paint and the compound didn't mix that well, so there's still some white spots because it's the drywall stuff that goes on pink and dries white. So just paint over that. And then I put a little bit of burnt umber on the brush and went around anything that was supposed to be wet to make it look like mud. And then go through with a small brush and just freehand on some lane lines. You could of course use a stencil or be a lot more careful than I'm being. But I figured, post-apocalypse, it's probably not going to be perfect. I also went through with some black wash and got pretty much all of the stuff that I had printed out, all the little gun towers, all that kind of stuff, just to sort of dial the paint back a little bit, make it look weathered. I accidentally dripped some on one of the road sections, and I didn't mean to, but after looking at it, I was like, actually, that's pretty cool. It kind of looks like an oil spill. So I went through and dripped some, just randomly. I've been told repeatedly not to keep trash, but I think you should probably keep a little trash. This box here is bits of leftover sand and grout powder and colorful papers and some supports from 3D prints and some rocks. So there's some skulls in there from something I didn't use. It's just random bits of garbage is essentially what it is. But that's exactly what I need, just random bits of actual garbage. So I went through and put down some glue piles and put the random bits of garbage. Then I used some alcohol to wash off the excess grout powder because it kind of coats everything and makes it brown. I wanted to wash that off to make it, show the little bit of metal supports and all that stuff. And a bit more glue here and there just to make sure it all sticks together. Then I put down some more glue and went through with some various static grass, and I don't have a static grass applicator, but it still works for this. Just try to figure out where grass might actually be in this sort of situation. So originally, if this were a racetrack, the whole diamond area between the pit stop and the track, that probably would be grass, and then the other area off to the side probably would be as well. But with all the post-apocalypse races happening, probably not so much. So I just went ahead and put it a little bit where it would have originally been, at least where I think it should have been, and then anywhere there's wet spots. But yeah, this is just 2 colors of static grass. One's kind of bright, one's a little darker, and then I'm using some really nice green moss flocking. And then once that's dry, you can go ahead and tilt your boards up and dump it all onto one board, and then dump that onto some collection point. It's going to be all mixed together at this point, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because then what you can do is take your stuff that is now mixed, go back through, add a little bit more glue, and add some of the stuff that's mixed anywhere something that just doesn't look right. It's too much of one color, or it's too sparse, or something like that. After I've done that, I just go through and drown it in a mix of water and glue, and this is just to make sure everything is super stuck down. And it was at about this point where I was nearly done that I realized my puddle there looks pretty bad, actually. I took the tape off and it just doesn't go together very well. There's a big gap in there. So I decided to go ahead and fix that. This time I put tape on only one side of the puddle, and then I put tape on the bottom of the other board to keep it from leaking. And then I duct taped the 2 boards together on the bottom side just to make sure they don't move. I put more epoxy with color in there and let that set up. It only takes 5 minutes because it's 5-minute epoxy. And then I realized what the problem was. The tape is getting wet with epoxy and then warping, and so when it dries, it dries all warped. So in order to fix that, I went ahead and ground off a little bit where it was sticking up strangely, and I mixed up a little bit more, just 1 more tube of clear epoxy. I didn't put any color in it this time. And then poured that in and made sure to smear it all over everything. When it was basically dry but still kind of warm, had a little bit of gumminess to it, I went ahead and took the boards apart, peeled the tape off, stuck them back together, and then used a little lighter. I didn't use a torch, just a lighter, just to heat it up enough to kind of smush it around. And then I used that same popsicle stick to go ahead and put some divots in it. And then while that's set up, I used some gloss Mod Podge to add like reflective water spills. And once I was done with that, all I had to do was tilt the boards apart and they'd snap right there because they weren't really glued with anything. But everything should match up now. Just like that. As a final step, I went through with some more grout powder and a sifter and just shook it all over everything to make everything pretty dusty. In order to make it stick, I just sprayed it with some alcohol. And then go ahead and repaint your edges nice and black or brown or whatever color it is you're going to use. But at this point you are definitely not going to have consistently colored edges. So just to clean it up and make it look nice, go through and paint them one solid color. Now when you want to put this thing away, they all stack up into a stack that is 18 by 18 by, I don't know, maybe about a foot high. All you got to do is unfold them. Pretty easy to see how they go together because the things in the middle and then the pipes on the one side. It's basically impossible to put them together wrong, but you could if you wanted to, actually. Just go ahead and assemble your water tower, put your gun towers out if you want to use those. You can write on the dry erase board there. And this thing is big enough to have 3 teams out, including teams that are using tanks. You could put a gate on the board, whatever you want to do. This whole thing is pretty much flat, so all of your movement template should work just fine. It's a little bit bumpy like the grass here, it'll be totally fine. On the trash piles, they're low enough that you could still use the movement template if you wanted, or you could make the cars crash into them, or however you want to do it. And to put it away, all you got to do is, clear the board, obviously. Take your sign off, and then make sure you pull those pipes apart first so you don't break them because of the way they go together. And if you flip the pipes to the opposite side and stack those, they go really well. And then you can put another one on top of the flat, and then the other one on top of that. And because of the water tower base and the center post thing is pretty much the same height as the water tower, they should stack pretty well. So I kept mentioning these gun towers. You guys might be wondering what's going on with that. As far as I know, they are not listed in the rules anywhere. I just thought it's something to be fun to do. Sometimes we like to play where we're not actually being aggressive towards each other, even though that is kind of the point of the game. But like say you're doing zombie bash or something like that, you're really trying to run over zombies, not so much just destroy the other team. So in order to make sure stuff does continually get destroyed without any finger pointing going on, I made some gun towers. So you can do the rules however you want. What we do is make it so that every new gear phase, a new tower activates. Because there are 8 towers, we just use a D8, figure out which platform is going to be which before you play. You roll the D8, lands on 4, you put up gun tower 4, it will shoot anything within range. If you don't want to use the gun towers, but you do like the little things so that you can put other things out, like maybe weapon pickups, or that's where you're going to put the zombie tokens or whatever you want, those little bases, the little silver ones I put down, those are magnetic on their own. So anything else that you stick down with magnets or that is metal or something like that should stick to them just fine. It's not like a super strong hold, but it's enough to keep it from falling over if the table gets bumped. But I think that's going to do it for this one, guys. Of course, as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.